Okay, so as a nice counterpart to the session that we had just now, which obviously showcased some of the better UK technology we've got going at the moment, this next session on hybrid innovative business and community projects from the Global South has a really, really strong set of people that we were lucky enough to have to the LCEDN sessions at the Kathmandu conference in March of 2018. And these people are going to come and talk to us about their counterparts, and the counterparts are UK companies on what they're doing in the Global South, how they are organising their businesses, how they are hybridising, how they're working into networks, so that we can kind of see who is actually doing the do and what kind of things that they're doing in the communities that we visit our projects on. So we've got Dipti Vaghela from the Hydro Empowerment Network Myanmar. We've got Tarek Ketelsen from the Australian Water Partnership, who works in Vietnam. Gerhard Fischer, the PT Entec Indonesia and ASEAN Hydropower Competance. Anshuman Lath from Gramoorja in India, and Charity Wanjiku, who's just walked in this very minute, and who are all involved to greater and lesser extent in running small-scale community energy renewable projects. So we're lucky that Dipti just turned up, because he only just got here. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dipti to have a talk. Sorry about jumping it on you like that, Dipti.
Yay! It's good to be here. So I coordinate and manage the Hydro Empowerment Network. It's a network of practitioners across 14 countries in South and Southeast Asia. And I have a couple of friends on this panel who will be going into more context-specific details. Today, I wanted to give you an overview of the different types of social entrepreneurs in our sector. All of you are probably familiar with large-scale energy access programs. And what I would like to share here are more the spectrum that ranges from that formalized large-scale programs to more organic forms of energy access. So just a quick overview. I'm going to start with defining what I mean by transforming energy access, and go through the types of social entrepreneurs, and end with some cases from our network. So these are the desired characteristics of what energy or what transformation of energy access would look like. Firstly, of course, you have renewable energy technologies and equitable, inclusive development. But then you also want to look at affordability, reliability. We want to address more than just lighting. It needs to be economic development, energy access. And it needs to fit within an economically viable model. So not just those that are sustained through grants, but actually have a business model, commercially viable model, that then can self-replicate into scaled programs. So in the typical program of energy access frameworks, you have these top-level stakeholders, and these names are based on sort of what the functionality is. So donors provide funding, governments create policy and regulations, and then there are NGOs or other such institutions doing implementation, and at the end, the village consumers sort of bear the weight of all that happens. But there's actually a middle tier, and that these are what I see as kind of the hands and hearts of energy access. These are the people who interface between the top and the bottom realms, the manufacturers, the technology suppliers, the persons and companies and organizations that make sure projects live on after they're installed. So social entrepreneurs, when you look at this picture, this is a 30 kilowatt micro-hydro system that my friend Tarek and I were at 2 days ago. It was about a 1 hour walk without any load. But to build this, you can see a pipeline faintly going through. There's a huge waterfall in the background that you can't see. And down below, I mean, it's a really well-kept powerhouse. And inside the powerhouse, there's a Pelton turbine, 3-jet generator. There's a locally made transformer. To make this happen in the middle of nowhere takes a lot of passion. And that turbine was fabricated locally. The whole project was self-financed by the community. It was provided upfront by the developer, and the community paid back over time. So social entrepreneurs are those that are mad enough to do this. And the entrepreneurs that do this do many, many of these. And we have Mr. Gerhard, who's going to talk later, but he's one of those people that actually inspire these social entrepreneurs and build their capacities. So one, they're able to overcome these extreme physical conditions. They have in-depth and long experience. Many of the groups we work with in Myanmar are third generation, so grandfather, father, son are all doing this type of work. They have a lot of networks and experiential knowledge built. And they engage in long-term partnerships, because there are other entrepreneurs that go in and come right back out. As soon as they get their payments, the contracts are finished, they want to move on. That's how their business model works. But in this case, these social entrepreneurs prioritize local impact over profit. So they do end up making profit. Sometimes they don't make profit. In the end, they're in it for the local impact. And they're entrepreneurs because they need this to happen within an economically viable model. So this is the framework we just looked at, and social entrepreneurs end up doing all of those pink shaded aspects. So they wear multiple hats. In the traditional model, you'd have different organizations and actors doing each of this. But these social entrepreneurs are in some ways limited, that they have all of these burdens on themselves, but yet are extremely talented that they can do all of this. But some key differences are, instead of funding, they look at financing. So not grants, but not capital subsidies, but interest subsidies would be an example. Instead of just energy consumers, they look at consumers as producers. So they find different ownership models and operational models that households are not just consuming electricity, but also managing this project, generating an income from it. Yeah, those are the two key differences. They also provide a lot of training for governance and operations based on that community's innate strengths and weaknesses. So the different types I've summarized, and again, my friends on this panel will go into details on some of these. But first you have the nonprofit realm, the NGO model, and you have very small NGOs, and then you have well-established large NGOs with international reputation, and both have their pros and cons. And the first graphic that we saw, what I define as transformation of energy access, may or may not be met. Actually, none of these meet all of that. In the nonprofit realm, the economic viability is very low because they depend on grants. So often, the donor has such heavy influence on timelines. You have to get project. In fact, I was working for a large nonprofit in Eastern India, and I would prioritize the donor's expectations over the long-term viability of the project, because that was the fire in front of me burning. And then later on, I would be like, oh, why didn't we design that 20 kilowatt to have a manual mechanical mill so that we could mill oil? So these are issues with the nonprofit realm. But the benefit they have, that I had, is that we included every household of the village in this project. So we could actually stick with our ideals. We had a savings fund developed. There were these NGO-type processes. But in the end, the projects, many projects, end up as white elephants, where the community, if they're not installed properly, maintaining them we were able to provide upfront capital costs, but then replacing bearings, replacing generators that were flooded because a valve was improperly installed. So these are the pros and cons of the nonprofit model. In the for-profit side, what I've seen in Myanmar especially is because you have financial accountability, you really make sure that the project is going to work completely and that it's going to work long term, because that for-profit entity has put its own skin in the game. It's going to make sure it's running 24 hours. The disadvantage is that it's a market-based approach. So the first year, 300 households might take a connection because they can afford it. And then as the project ends up gaining more income with different types of economic business models, for instance, in one developer's project in Myanmar, he subsidizes the residential households with commercial loads. But that takes a while. He starts with a 30 kilowatt system, then upgrades to an 80, and then 300 kilowatts. But that takes probably 4 or 5 years. He's self-financing this. He's building the trust of the community in the technology. So unlike the nonprofit model, where from the start we could do 100% inclusion, in the for-profit model, it's difficult. And within the for-profit model, you have two flavors. You have local companies, like the entrepreneurs I just mentioned in Myanmar, and you also have foreign companies. The foreign companies are the ones that make really nice presentations, speak English, have marketing resources, nice teams from Ivy League schools. But the local entrepreneurs have none of that. But they have a lot of track record on the ground. And the foreign entities have no track record on the ground. And yet they're the ones listened to. So this is that, yeah. And then there's a middle path, the local cooperative, where we'll see if one of my friends talks about this, but we're discovering this local cooperative model is where you have the plus points of the NGO nonprofit model, but as well as elements of an enterprise. So our network works across these countries. A group of them are quite advanced, others are in the middle, and then I'll just go through. These are just snapshots of how we work. So in Pakistan, the Aga Khan Rural Support Network and its partners have done many projects, and now they want to actually connect projects to each other and form local utilities. And so we are supporting them to engage with our members in Nepal that have already worked through this answer or problem, and bring it to their projects. In India, we have a lot of badly designed projects, but a strong community engagement. This is the nonprofit model there. We need to rehabilitate these projects, make them economically viable. So these are some themes that my network focuses on. In Myanmar, we've helped to establish this local association. This is a phenomenal context. Each one of these persons at the bottom has implemented 150 to 200 projects, and they have their priority is really access to local bank financing. They don't want grants and subsidies. Then we have Indonesia. Mr. Gerhard is going to explain more about this concept, but 25 years of knowledge in this picture. They are exporting technology to Europe, having had decades of capacity building and function in very professional ways. But now they are also in need of bank financing. They have this wonderful center that Gerhard will tell you about. It's being underutilized. So our network works on these aspects. In Mindanao, in the Philippines, we have a very small NGO that does amazing microhydro work. They first work on the watershed and have excellent community processes, but they really need increased visibility. So our network works to connect practitioners in these ways. First, we connect these implementing organizations to each other. We connect them to in-country stakeholders, and then we also connect the same practitioners to international stakeholders who tend to shape the dialogue and influence the funding in the end. So, and in this process, we've realized that that we end up connecting international stakeholders to each other because they didn't know of each other. They often work in parallel. But yeah, it's just a quick summary of our network. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Dipti. I've always been blown away by the sheer sort of length and breadth of experience that Dipti has in this kind of networking stuff, and hopefully we, the LCEDN, are going to have a lot more to do with HPNet in future. I've just remembered that my good colleague Ayu reminded me to say to those people who are taking part in the mini-grid game session tomorrow, please can you bring a laptop with you? It works using a local Wi-Fi hotspot, therefore the more laptops that you bring with you, the better. It's a fantastic game, and I can't recommend it highly enough, having played it in Kathmandu when we went to the ASEAN Conference. So the next person up is Dipti's colleague Tarek Ketelsen, who I'll just step aside and listen to.
Thanks very much, John, and also to everyone at Loughborough for the hospitality, not for the weather. I'm really struggling, I've got to say. I've never worn so many clothes in years, actually. So my name is Tarek Ketelsen. I'm from an organization called, a company called Amperes, and we're based out of Vietnam, but we're working 50% of the time in Myanmar, 50% of the time in Vietnam. This is, the title of the presentation says it's about battery storage and their role in mini-grids. That's true, but it's mostly about, I guess, the need to think beyond the technology and a little bit more about the business model. So we came in as a solar developer, and then we sort of went through a learning process to understand that actually the technology is not the thing that's going to make this work. It's how all the pieces fit together, and this is just in some ways it reflects the evolution of our thought and our thinking. So we go somewhere warmer for a little bit, just the next 5 minutes. We go to Southeast Asia. I'll go quite quickly through these background slides. I think everybody knows this kind of detail. There has been lots of progress in terms of electrification, but there's less progress in the rural areas compared to the urban areas. There's issues of quality of the supply for electricity in most of the Southeast Asian countries, and there's also some financial issues relating to the costs of grid-based supply once you start to get out of rural areas. And I think the point was made earlier that this is all about this lack of access to electricity is really impeding development of rural communities in Southeast Asia. So what role is mini-grids can they play inside this? Well, I think there's sort of we can divide into two niche areas, and I've covered the countries roughly around that. So on the blue countries, you have the areas that are remote and difficult to reach. So they can be the actual physical islands like Indonesia and Philippines, but they can also be the kind of, I guess you'd call them economic islands of the remaining off-grid areas in places like Vietnam and in places like Thailand, where the cost of extending the grid to these low density areas is just a bit prohibitive. Okay, and so if we think about, and sorry, the second one is those areas where there isn't any grid development at the moment, so places like Myanmar and Laos and Cambodia, and there's a potential to rethink the model of the energy sector development. So this graph is really nice because it summarizes this thinking. If you look on the bottom left corner there, you can see the large populations, high density populations. In those areas, grid extension makes a lot of sense. Then as you, I think, did I get a pointer here? Yeah. How do we turn that back on, the webcam? Okay. All right. Then, and then as the density and the size of communities decrease, then the cost of grid extension increases and increases. Over this end, you've got areas where populations are so sparse and low density that the home solar is really a good option for initial access to electricity. And this bit in the middle is the bit that we're talking about for mini grids, and it really is technology agnostic. It's about how does the mini grid work? How do the developers relate to the communities, and some of the points that Dipti was mentioning earlier. I just wanted to just to give two opposite examples very quickly of Vietnam and Myanmar. So I'll start with the Vietnam story. Vietnam has started developing small hydro in the 1960s. They did lots of projects with equipment from China and Eastern Europe. They started with what we call like commune energy groups, so something like a community-owned group. Then they went in the 1980s to scale things up. They went towards more cooperative structures, I guess you would call them, and they made a lot of success in the 1980s. And I won't go into this one into detail because we definitely don't have time. But there's this line here showing the rates of electrification, which is commendable that Vietnam has gone through. And if you look at this, just this 10-year period down here, you can look at the share of these three blocks here: the community energy groups, the power company, which is the EVN, and the cooperatives up here. And you can see that over time, the community energy groups are kind of squeezed out. Note the start of electricity law. The cooperatives were then squeezed out, and now most of the power is really done by EVN. So mini grids in this space have a challenge, and that challenge is that it's very difficult for other actors, like for example myself, to get involved in electricity in Vietnam. On the Myanmar side, I just want to make a couple of quick points. So Myanmar has a plan to electrify to all of its people by 2030. They think the best way to do this is, with advice from the Japanese, is that they should extend the grid to 98% of the population. Some challenges, I think, is that it's obviously a bit ambitious to extend the grid of a country the size of Myanmar. There are issues of equity, so I won't talk about this, but if you look at where the grid is at the moment, you look at where the ethnic minority groups are at the moment, they're not correlated at all. So there'll be, as the grid extends, you'll be leaving all the ethnic minority groups to the end. That'll have issues for the peace process in Myanmar and conflict resolution. And the last one, which Dipti has already mentioned, is about the practicality. It's ignoring that there's this already quite thriving that there are a couple of thousand of mini hydro projects that are now on the ground inside Myanmar and are facing that same kind of squeeze that we saw on the Vietnamese graph, where this kind of approach is really struggling to survive because there aren't the policy and regulatory supports for them. So Dipti has already shown this. This is just just to point out the example that Dipti mentioned. That here's a guy. He's the one who's the developer of the project. This is the description of his project here. But he also then helped identify all of these other productive uses, like layer hen feed production facility, coffee farms, like village water supply, water pump system. He was bringing all of these things together, and that's sort of key, I think, to the success of their model. Okay, so now just very quickly on the batteries. I'll skip this one. Globally, I think we're starting to see in the national grids that there's a need for batteries because of the two things they can provide: reliability and flexibility. These graphs, I think you would have seen a lot in social media, so I won't describe them. But one is the Tesla factory in South Australia, where they're providing this reliability when there isn't power, it kicks in and keeps power continuous. And the top one on the left there is showing that the power market, so the price of electricity is going negative in Germany when there's lots of wind and demand is low, like on weekends. So there's a flexibility issue there as well as a reliability issue. And I think the same can be considered for mini grids at a different scale, that batteries have a role to support the reliability and the flexibility of mini grids, regardless of whichever technology. So I'll start with this project here. This is one farm that we developed a mini grid for in a couple of years ago. So we have a functioning grid there for 2 years now, and it's a 53 kilowatt solar project, and it's got two batteries. One is a saltwater battery made by a company was called Aquion, and then another one's a lithium-ion battery called Testvolt. So we've been having a number of years that we can compare the performance of these two batteries and see how they apply in kind of real conditions, hot conditions, and so on. Okay, I'm trying to go fast. So here are the two batteries. First thing to see is the one on the left is these are the Aquion batteries here, and this is what the lithium battery looks like. This one is cradle to cradle certified, so it's completely recyclable. You drink the electrolyte if you want to. This side is a conventional lithium-ion battery. What they have done differently is, same lithium-ion batteries that Tesla is using or Samsung is producing, but they've developed a battery management system. So they allows you to control each cell individually, and then it allows you to optimize the state of charge and discharge of all of those cells. So they're the two systems installed. First thing to notice is this is the layout of the site. These grey ones here are the Aqueon batteries, and this is just to scale. This one here is the lithium-ion battery. If you look at half of these Aqueon batteries is the same capacity as one of these lithium-ion batteries. So this is 60 by 60 centimeters, 2.3 meters high. This is heavy, full of salt water and other material. So if we were to take it down the hill of if we had to try and take it down the hill to the powerhouse of the picture you showed earlier, there are some logistical issues in terms of choosing different technologies as well. Skip that one. The main thing to say, so I just summarized by making one point on these batteries, is that if you look at this is the, I guess you could say like the state of the charge of the batteries, the test volt on the top and the Aqueon on the bottom. You can see as the sun rises, I think I can't read when it's 6 o'clock in the morning or so, it will take the test volt battery, it'll be charged by 11:12. Whereas if you look at the Aqueon battery, it won't be charged until 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So both of these have applications that are useful, but if you're looking, if you're looking to charge quickly so that you can still keep using during the day, then there are implications for this. And now, just very quickly, John, have I got 2 minutes left or 1 minute? Yeah. So when we started this, we started looking at combining different sources together, looking at mini grids that might bring, say, solar and hydro together. This is from an output from the mapping tool that I mentioned earlier. We can see this is the solar irradiation for one village, and this is the wind, and this is the hydro. So there is complementarity in the different resources, but it's not really the resources that you have to get to match. It's more the load and the resources that have to match. And the load profiles in these rural areas of Myanmar are typically like this bottom one here, where you have a peak in the start of the day, a peak at the end of the day, and then a low bit in the middle when people are out in the fields working. So finding ways of meeting this load is what's needed. If we were to be a hydro project, so say the load looks something like this. If you wanted to provide reliable power to this village using just hydro, you'd have to meet that peak load. So you'd have to provide a turbine that can meet the load up to that top level there, whatever the units are, it doesn't matter. But I think we're realizing there's a more optimal solution, which could be a smaller turbine that allows you to provide power the majority of the time, and then using batteries to store power, to charge a battery here and then discharge here, charge a battery here and discharge here to help you to meet the peaks. And why this is, I think why we see some interest in this is because these economic aspects of the projects are important for the local developers, and I think it's a way to allow a more phased approach to development of their projects. It allows them to be a bit more viable, and I think that's something that it's something we're interested to move forward as well. So I think that's all I need to say. Thanks, John.
Okay. So thanks very much for that, Tarek. Can I just say that you can keep your questions to the end. We're going to kind of keep the presentations going and do that. Can I also remind our visitors, as a matter of courtesy, that there's only British people who are allowed to make jokes about the weather. So there are things that are not our fault, and the weather is one of them, and you can't joke about that. There are things that are our fault, like Brexit, you can joke about that. But Gerhard, Fischer is out.
Okay, yeah, I am Gerhard Fischer. I'm working in Indonesia on the hydropower sector. You already mentioned my name. I want to discuss a bit the technology transfer on the example of hydropower turbines, which we developed. Yeah, so I think at least 24 years ago, hydropower was very good source of energy. Now we get competition from photovoltaics, but still I think it's a good option to develop rural areas. We have to think about what the technology transfer should be, and the question is how to do this. Our experience is that we need a bottom-up capacity building, and so the private sector can follow the projects themselves. Of course, the transfer needs a sustained input to achieve something. So it's not enough to go 2 years there and think this is happening. In Indonesia, we're working now already 25 years and also having second generation in the manufacturer, so the children take over, which I count as a sustainability factor. So one thing is, what our experience is, you have to have projects. Yeah? So learning by doing is still the best. And we have to think why, how, and what. So we need a market, then we need a training to understand how to do that, and then we need real projects that the manufacturers can apply what they have. Otherwise, there is no sustainability to reach. So I want to explain a bit the steps of the technology transfer in Indonesia. We started in '92. First, we concentrated on the turbine technology, and basically, cross flow turbine is the most appropriate for standardizing the turbines. Then we had to develop the civil structure design to somehow have standardized civil designs. Then the control technology was implemented, which is also an important factor on the technology. And of course, as already mentioned, the productive end use, what to do with the energy, not only consumptive, but also to produce some income for the villages. Yeah. And finally, institutional aspects, which are also very, very important. So if you have a village operating a power plant, you have to set up on the enterprise to manage it, to have income, open balance, and so on. Otherwise, you cannot pay the operators, and it will not be sustainable. So technology is a full package, beginning from the nature, looking at the forests, up to the use of the people. So it's quite a challenging thing, maybe different than opening a photovoltaic panel and plug it in. So I want to explain a bit this process with turbine development. So we try to enhance the local input so that the power plant is locally built. And as I said, the cross flow turbine which we used is very good to standardize. It's like a runner, and if you make the runner half width, you have half of the flow. So you can adapt with the same design, you can adapt easily for the flow, and maybe 2-3 diameters, you can have a very big range of appliances. So as the man from the mapping thing says, we need 20 kilowatt turbines, but it's not so easy to do that. So we started this development in Nepal, some 1975, and that was the T1. Now we had a T15, which is some kind of evolution of this design, which is now quite famous. So to develop that, we came with the shortcomings of earlier versions and made the research work in University of Stuttgart. And based on that, we were designing the turbine as it is now. And you can see that the improvement of the efficiency, the lower line is the T12 turbine, and the red line is the improved T15, which is now the basics for everything what we are doing in this sector. Yeah, so basically this took place from 2000 to 2004, and then design was somehow finished, and we applied it to the manufacturers in Bandung and Indonesia. So we started somehow with a 300 millimeter diameter turbine, which you can see here. It's quite heavy to bring into the powerhouse, but this has a wide range of applications. And for village electrification, we need maybe 20, 30 kilowatt. This turbine is perfectly suitable. And here's an example for a village with 30 kilowatt. There's even a grid connected since some years. One of the first grid connected sites in Indonesia. Of that size, and it's running since maybe 25 years already running and in good condition. This is our little bit masterpiece of this technology. We are supplying a tea plantation with 20 tons production per day. So this is only running on hydro now, also with a storage lake, and about 300,000 liter fuel is not burned out. And this potential was there since 40 years, but it needed us to come to use it. Yeah. And now the tea plantation is very happy because they make a lot of money, or they don't lose a lot of money by fuel. Yeah, so maybe one thing is always the issue, cost versus quality. And that is an issue which is following up my life all the time, because people want to make it cheap and I want to make it good. So you can see everything is possible. This is from Rwanda, an example I think I discussed with somebody. So this is just from the scrapyard, and the people handle it with bigger skills, but it's dangerous. You see the blank cables, and every day he has to fiddle around. So maybe we can help this a bit to be improved with the technology and skills. It's not a matter of money, it's a matter of applying skills. So I want to give one example, what is cheap. So everybody knows these old bulbs, $50, or you have these LED bulbs, which cost maybe $7. Asking a normal human being, he will say, what is cheap? $50. But if you start analyzing it, it's a bit different. So you can follow the lifetime, the energy consumption, and you find with this bulb you lose $95 cheaper. So if you change a bulb in your house now, you make $100. So just don't think about it, just change it. But this type of thinking also is needed for hydropower, because it's a long-term investment. You don't look for the next day until this bulb is broken. And so I'm fighting for LED technology thinking, and this is a different age. So I think this is a important message, that the quality matters the most in this thing. So when I was young, my father told my mother, we are too poor to buy cheap shoes. So we bought one shoe, and it was 20 years clean every Monday or every Sunday. So I think that is also the poor projects should not waste money by changing too much and fiddling around. Better give them the know-how to do proper technology, use their skills as they can do it. And on the other side, also the most expensive must not be the best. So that you cannot say because it's expensive it will be okay. So that means the technology transfer must improve the quality. We have to put, if we put an effort, like a benchmark. A benchmark, that's how it should look like, and people can copy it more or less the way they should do it. And so, yeah, these are some development steps of these turbines, and also technology transfer needs a risk-taking, entrepreneurial risk. So, for example, we designed a turbine for Kyrgyzstan and build it there. So designing in Bandung, building it there with the things, and that is the reality of this 3D model, installed 3 times 250 kilowatt, and that was using the water of irrigation channel, which anyway went down the hill, and we built the powerhouse there. Easy going, and this potential is good. So it's just free. Need some technology. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I want to see here this is the development of this production in Bandung. You see different companies from '92, started slowly, and the fuel price go up, and we are on a quite good way of developing already about 20 megawatt. And if I look all the turbines we build in Bandung, or in Indonesia, it's about 1,100 turbines, 50 megawatt. Also exporting turbines to everywhere. And controllers the same, already 1,700 controllers built within this technology transfer. That's the result of 25 years of input. And yeah, So we also give licenses for these turbines to different countries, which get a training in Bandung. They can build a turbine, take it home and continue. For example, Ethiopia, 2008, we have a company. So I went back to the practitioners, they improved their turbines, also not building our turbine, but they have learned something and improved it. Yeah. And also Pakistan, 2010, 4 manufacturers came, and 2 of them already built about 250 turbines, 70 megawatt installed power. Also Nigeria, we had a training, also going not only turbines, but the whole technology package from the river to the consumers. Also Tanzania, UNIDO came and we built a turbine, and in Tanzania last year we installed it and operated it. It's a good example, hardware thing. Yeah. Also there are some kind of packages like ready-made things, yeah, so time is running. Also a little bit simpler turbine design we can promote. That was a bigger one, and project failed in 2002, but now 1 megawatt turbine was built also. Just needs time to do it. Yeah. Propeller turbines also developed, open flume, and this was a master project for Switzerland, also losing a lot of money but gaining experience, installing that in Switzerland with a team of 3 Indonesian engineers, myself installing it, and they come back with a different point of thinking about technology and quality. This is a rehabilitation we made in Sumatra. It's a 1 megawatt Pelton turbine installation, and we have a CDM agreement with My Climate in Switzerland. So we also have 3 minutes or 3. Okay, so these are some some examples here. Last year we built a turbine in our Bänke, in our workshop with 400 kilowatt with our Entec team. Now HYCOM is a training center which we built up in Bandung with the equipment of Swiss University, which closed down the Hydro lab, and I got a container full of turbines. Took me 5 years to build it up. And there is Francis turbine, Kaplan, Crossflow, and we can give trainings there and share the experience. So there are many trainings going on there. We have global workshops from NDEF all over the world. They came, and also going to the sites outside there, seeing some practical projects, and yeah. So some pictures, half-pay network. So Dipti was here with, I don't know, practitioners all over the world. So connecting them, I think, is a very good approach to go ahead with things. And yeah, okay. And also now HYCOM is complementary. They build up a renewable energy center for vocational school teacher training. So HYCOM has grown to a renewable energy center as it was my dream, but it needs time and patience and go steady ahead. Okay, what's next? I think I would be very pleased to have some kind of technology transfer activities involving our capacity in Indonesia, for Myanmar, Philippines, India, African countries. I'm very pleased because my career started 40 years ago in Zambia. I was building a turbine. Since that time, I infected from hydro disease. And of course, South-South cooperation, linking the actors all over the areas here, avoiding repeating error, accelerating learning curve, and use the trainings options we can provide. I think that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed for that. Yeah, that was fantastic, and obviously a man with decades of experience of doing the do, as we say. So next up we have Anshuman Lath from Gramoorja organisation in India. Anshuman was telling me before the presentation that he is now responsible for up to 39, is it, mini grids in India? So 59, pardon me. So we have a vast amount of experience too. So
thank you so much, and thank you, Dipti, and Tarek and Gerhard, I was really impressed with your presentations. So Gramoorja, Gram in Indian languages means rural and Urja means energy. So as the name suggests, Gramoorja is a rural energy solutions private company. And what have we chosen? So you look at the map of India here, and there's a green belt that you see. So these are the 59 districts in India which have more than 25% tribal population. And when you say tribal population, essentially it means forests, and forests means a little bit of remoteness and undulating territory, difficult to serve mainstream projects, mainstream grid in some of these areas. So right now we have close to 59 microgrids operational, around 130 solar water pumps, and a few biogas-based cooking grids. So we are not a technology company. We started off with solar and stuff like this, but right now we're focused on the consumer. So if the consumer demands a certain kind of a solution, we try and find what is the best answer. So a lot of our current work has been in biogas, and here we're trying to do a lot of biogas-based cooking grids. So understanding from our learnings in solar in terms of the microgrids that we've done, trying to do the same thing with a centralized model of a biogas plant, and then a pipeline which runs with a metered connection to each household. So these are the projects, or maybe you see. So we try to map this kind of a territory, which is essentially remote, because we are here to try and solve problems. So we try and assess what the problems are in these communities and try and do something like this. So this is the first village which we inaugurated. This is July 4th, 2012, so 6 years ago. And this is Bosch Solar Energy AG wanting to do some projects in India, and they did one in partnership with us. So this is a tribal community of around 40 households, and they are still off grid. They just still don't get the grid because they're not a registered village. It's a hamlet of a larger village, but 3 kilometers away. And there's no motorable road, so you have to walk down 3 kilometers to reach this village. So as of now, it's almost 6 years, 1 month less. And this plant is still functional. There are 15 televisions in this village now. There is a pump which they've been running for roughly 4.5 years. Every month, every house has been metered. They're collecting money. And people from more than 30 odd countries have come and seen this, including people from Africa and a lot of researchers from European and American universities, and have done case studies. But more importantly, we have used this, to showcase this project to other communities across India, to other tribal communities like the Gonds, Bhils, Korkus, and Mundas around. So today we work with roughly 13 tribes across this area, and this has become one of the flagship projects which has helped us learn. But more importantly, we did some things intuitively. We made some mistakes, and out of all this, a kind of a learning has evolved, which we will come to later. So this is again what we're trying to just explain to you is the terrain that we work in. You can see this primary health center somewhere in Nandurbar district of Maharashtra, and you can see where it is. You can see how difficult it is to reach, and it's unlikely that the grid will come here. Or if it comes, unlikely that the reliable power will be supplied over a long period of time. So these are tribal communities, and therefore to be able to make projects successful in these areas, you have to involve them, and that's one of the core activities that we do. When we went into communities, we realized that a lot of the villages are electrified, but water is a big problem because they stay on top of a hillock or on top of a hill, and the water source could be a well or a stream somewhere down below. And there's a daily trek, and if you'll see that each of these vessels is roughly 15 to 20 kilograms. So a head load of 30 kilograms is a very normal phenomenon here. And very young girls, and this is predominantly a gender issue, with mostly women getting all the water, and very young girls start getting involved in this, and this is a daily course. So one of our core anecdotes that I like to say is that one village in Jharkhand, which was a very remote village, we went there, and there was this girl who used to teach at a school. So she's like done her graduation, and she teaches undergrad, as you call it here, and she teaches at a school somewhere, and then she comes back, and we were having lunch because we knew his father, her father, and she says, I don't want to live in this village anymore, and it's only because of the water. So every day there's a trek 2 times a day to get water. And this is a candid photograph we took once of people who just filled up their pots and are walking back to their homes. So you can imagine. So this could be typically 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 1 hour every day of just getting water, apart from the time taken at the well, which could be quite. Especially these 2 months, April and May, are very bad in most of these tribal areas. Even if they get very good water or rainfall, by the time you are approaching the next season of monsoons, which is starting like June mid or something like that, April and May becomes very bad. And then the third problem which we see is this biomass-based cooking. So slowly you're seeing a lot of penetration of LPG also in these remote areas, but the offtake is quite a mixed bag. So people would use maybe 2 or 3 LPG cylinders a year compared to maybe 7 or 8 in urban households. So there is a stacking of fuels, as people call it, and there's a lot of usage of biomass still in these households. And this is an interesting picture. So this is somewhere in the middle of the country, and this is milk. Now, milk is perishable, so unless you can get it to the market the same day, it perishes. So the only way to make it worthwhile, or retain the value or increase its value, is to impart some energy to it. So either you have to cool it or you have to heat it. So here again, this energy is being imparted, but you can see that all of this is firewood. So there is a conflict between the authorities who want to safeguard the forests and the conflict between the communities who want this firewood. Now this also means that this is not a very poor household. So you're talking of a lot of milk here every day. This is a daily collection of milk in that house. So this could essentially mean anywhere upwards of 50 pounds of milk that you're seeing here. So it's not small. So we tried also one small hybrid of a micro hydro with a solar in one of the remote villages. This is in the forest areas, and in only March and April you can install this, because that's the time the stream goes down, and as the stream goes up again, this turbine starts working, and this has been quite successful. This is one of the 59 villages where the grid has now reached. So last year around May or June, the grid reached this village. And then we interacted with the community and asked them what do you want to do with it. And till now, every month, every household still pays the bills and they're very happy. And one of the things that they said is that, intuitively we would feel that if there is light, you are more productive at home. But in this village, the women said that because we know there is light back home, we can work later in the fields till it gets dark. Earlier, we would make sure that we get to our homes just before it gets dark, because we can then make sure we can do the cooking before it gets dark. But right now, they can. It's that reliability which is a big factor, and that's the reason they continue using this grid, microgrid, even if the national grid is there, but it's not so reliable. So out of all this, this is the critical circle, as we call it. I mean, not really a circle of success, but we want to make sure that we can focus on all 5 aspects. And in these kinds of remote village energy projects, if we don't look at any of these aspects, it's likely to be failing. So we'll just try to go through this in so this is very strong community interaction, trying to make sure that the community understands what it is getting into. So after our first few projects, every village that we have worked in, we made sure that a group of men and women from the village have actually gone to another such project, whether it's a solar drinking water project or it's a microgrid or even if a biogas. There has to be an exposure visit which helps them understand. Then they get back, talk to their villagers and say that, okay, we are in it or we don't want it. So we only work in areas where there have been cases where we've been very, very close to developing a project and people say, oh, we don't want it and we have to walk back. Because unless there is a community ownership or a community buy-in, there is no way these remote projects will succeed, is our understanding. And then we try and get a cluster of villages, at least the main people, 2 or 3 people from each village, to come and do a lot of capacity building with them. The second is the design for aspirations. So earlier we have seen a lot of projects in India which used to be like 2 LED bulbs for 4 hours a day, just providing basic lighting and this kind of stuff. And most of them had issues with collection, so people would not pay money and stuff like that. But here, wherever we have been working, we have been telling people that this is going to be grid quality power. So even if people are off grid, they have family and they have exposure to places which have the grid. So they know what is grid quality power, and we kind of have insisted that we will be conforming to their aspirations. And so, a very strong quality focus. I think this is what Gerhard was mentioning, and I fully endorse, because in these remote areas, like some of our villages, we cannot go from June 15th to roughly September 15th, 3 months of the monsoons, they cut off. There would be some stream which becomes a small river for 3 months and they're behind that and there's no way you reach. So in these places, you just don't want to, have a battery problem or an inverter problem. So we don't want to even go that path. So domestic users essentially power, and entertainment is a big thing. So today I think a lot of our villages, the first thing that we see when we power them is that televisions start coming in. And And it's a big game changer, because otherwise there is a distress in that area once night sets in. So it's like a lot of, it's kind of a way of connecting to the outside world. So this is something which we've seen. And then there are a lot of primary health centers, as we saw in the first picture, and these community spaces and schools that we've been able to. So when we go into an area, it will be like 40, 50 households, villages, and we try and see what are their needs, whether it's electrification of a village or of a school, of a primary health center, of water in some cases, and we try and do a total solution for all of these villages instead of doing piecemeal solution. A lot of productive loads that we thought would come up, and this has not been a great success, but we see a lot of small flour mills, small rice mills, and pumping solutions coming up. Pumping essentially, so you saw that trek, of women coming with water from 1 or 2 kilometers or something like this, and all of a sudden you have these 4 or 5 connections in a village, which is very close. What we have now realized, and there's an impact assessment, study being done by University of Minnesota along with some other people, and you see that earlier it was like 2 vessels per person, right? When you were you're taking it back from those wells or from the stream, and all of a sudden it's like 3 or 4. So water usage goes up. So instead of just cooking and drinking water, there's some sanitation, there's some cleanliness, there's some washing of clothes. You can see already that the number of vessels have gone up by almost 50%, and this is something that we have seen as an output in some of these places. The third aspect after community interaction and designing for aspirations is metering. So each one of our 59 microgrids, each one of our consumers is metered. So this is to ensure discipline. So each one gets a bill at the end of every month from the local village energy committee, and there has a tariff which has been agreed with them over a period of time. The last part is ownership transfer to make sure that the project continues for a long period. So this is all about sustainability, and we are happy to say that out of the 200 odd community-based projects that we've done, not more than 4 or 5 have really failed because of either social, institutional, technical issues. In most cases, drinking water projects where the water dries up and no water. So that's about it. So it might be a failure rate of less than 5% over these. So 6, 7 years, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, a lot of these projects running. So this is the ownership transfer where each village opens a bank account with 4 or 5 people as members, and they collect money, and every month there is an addition to the bank amount. So this is the community interaction, the ownership transfer, which so they will set up, like every household will provide 3 man days while we set up the project, for example, or 5 man days, which means that they become involved. This is interesting because this is a Warli painting. We work with the Warli tribe, and this is a deaf and dumb painter who did this. So this is depicting family, village life. A lot of women doing a lot of stuff in the village, and all of a sudden you see a solar panel come there, and So this is acceptance. So now this is a transformation, as Jessica was mentioning, where now this is a part of their village life. It is no going back from here. This solar, along with this pump and this, is a part of their life. And in this one, he's actually put a solar panel with a whole grid here. So there's a grid with a street light, and there's a pump and stuff like this. So this is the acceptance levels which we aspire to reach for the projects to become sustainable. So in this, if you give me 2 more minutes, we're seeing a lot of trees but no branches. So I have to rush through. Branches essentially are gone for cooking. So people nowadays don't cut trees, but branches really disappear very fast, and it's a daily need. And that brings us to our biogas plants, where we try and do community-based biogas plants, one for the whole village, then a pipeline which goes through the whole village, a metered connection again here in each household, and that enables them to do the cooking. So this is something we're trying to map the high cattle population areas in India, and we're trying to see where there's high firewood usage in India, and we're trying to see if we can do some. In these projects, there is a possibility of some capital also coming back very soon because of some climate funding also possible. There has been a third-party impact study over the last 1 year with University of Minnesota taking the lead, and some of the things are pretty good to know that 84% people saying that the bills seem to be fair across something like 300, 400 households that they surveyed. Someone saying that 50 liters per day per person is available, so this is a 35% increase in water use in these villages, and this is not like a surplus use. It's like coming from a very bad deficit kind of a situation to an easier situation. Economically, some amount of electricity and livelihood activities, but not as we would have wanted it. It should have been faster, because none of our microgrids are only lighting based. All of them need to have some productive loads, like a rice mill, a flour mill, or a pump, or something like this. Environmentally, again, okay, indoor air quality, and the feeling is this. 84% institutionally, saying that 84% saying that feeling of ownership has been transferred to their community, 78%. So on the whole, feel good factor for us, in the sense that, yeah, and also a course correction mechanism that, okay, this is what you could do better. So in the future projects, make sure that this is something that we can do better. So 40-50 minutes extra hours a day, 40-50 minutes extra for women from fetching water, 30-40 minutes extra for study. I don't know whether they really do it, but yeah, the usual stuff. So yeah, thank you so much.
That's pretty amazing set of accomplishments there, I think, Anshuman has shown us. And last but by no means least, our very good friend from Kenyan charity Wanjiku from Strauss Energy is going to encapsulate.
Good evening, everybody. I have the pleasure of being your last presenter. So I will make it short and sweet. So we're not all looking at our watches. It's 5:13. Just so you know. So yes, I'm Charity and a co-founder of this wonderful company called Strauss Energy, based in Nairobi, Kenya. We are a renewable energy company, I like to say, fairly young. We've been in operations for the last 4 years, the first 2 in product development, and pretty much the last 2 trying to access the market and get into the market really and do some installations. We are majorly in solar, PV, so I'm very interested in Anshuman, I forget that, I can't pronounce the name, the gentleman who just did the presentation. I think I will see you after this. You had a very interesting presentation that we could do some business together. So we are in solar roofing, and as you can see from our cover page, we are makers of solar roofing tiles. Our 2-in-1 innovative solution to the increasing housing demand in Kenya. So what do we do really? Again, I say we're in solar. We majorly in solar, but we also have other services that we offer, and maintenance. And recently we went into mini grids as well. So I was very interested in the last presentation, and considering it's in India, it's a relatively similar environment as ours. So that's something I would be very interested in, because we are putting up 3 mini grids, probably 8 now, by the time I get back. And that's a new ground that we've gone to. We are also into storage, and our storage is still in development, but it's compressed air, very different from what we see in the market at the moment. But it's still in development, and we're looking at having our very first pilot project by the end of this year within our meteorological department. So these are some of our partners. Some of you may know some of them. We are based at the Kenya Climate Innovation Center, for those who know about CICs. It's based at the Strathmore University, and I have some colleagues from Strathmore University who are also our partners, because we do our testing at the Strathmore Energy Research Center. That's where we've done our roofing tile testing. We partner with Power Africa as well, and I believe one partner, key partner who's not here, is GIZ, because we are working with them on the mini grids, which I'll talk about a little later. So what do we do exactly? I love this picture because it shows exactly what we do, or what our mission is as Strauss Energy. We want to sell electricity during the day and harvest it at night. Do our laws or policies allow that yet? Not quite so. Not quite so, but just a little bit. We are looking at powering every roof in Kenya because we have a rising housing demand, and one of the agendas that the current government has, it's a four-pronged agenda. It's called the Big Four agenda, and one of them is housing, and energy is part of it as well. So we're looking at housing and how we can power every roof in Kenya with solar, because we have the sun upon us 10 months a year. You want to come to Kenya, you want to live in Kenya. It's unbelievable. I can't believe it's raining here. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 2 more to go, right? Our weather is amazing. For those who've been in Kenya, you understand what I'm talking about. So we want to roof every home, sell the electricity, and harvest it at night. But there's some hiccups on that, but that's entirely what we want to do. So how are we doing this? Strauss Energy brought into the market a 2-in-1 roofing tile. We call it the steamer tile. Steamer is electricity in Swahili. So that's what we offer the market at the moment. We have different sizes of our tiles. We have an 8-watt, which is very common with residential homes because it does look like a typical tile. You'll see from the 2 pictures I have there. That's a school that we roofed in the central part of Kenya and a house that we did in the outskirts of Nairobi. And other systems that we have are 24-watt, 50-watt, 150, and now 250, which we would use for our mini grids. So that's what we offer. So what are we trying to do with this? We're a young company, but we have a vision. So we're looking at reliable electricity because we have the sun for most of the year. So solar, as we all know, is very reliable. When the sun doesn't come out, then it means we don't need to be here, really, because we won't be here anyway. Just because the sun is not out today doesn't mean it's not there. Oh. Right, we're looking at reducing the energy gap in Kenya. We have a vision of 15,000 megawatts by 2030. But at the moment, we only have a capacity of 2,400 megawatts. So it's a tall order. How are we going to do that with a majorly use of hydropower? It's not going to work. So we're looking at any other way that we can help bridge this energy gap that we have in Kenya. And this is one of the ways we're trying to do it. We're looking at increasing industrial market for making making electricity cheaper, because one of the cries that we get from the industries is how expensive electricity is, and it is for the Kenyans here, for those who keep up with the news. In my country, one of the cries that we have recently is how expensive electricity is. I'll show you a slide on that. We're looking at my background. Let me just qualify this before I even say it. My background is architecture, and aesthetics for me are critical. So we're looking at an aesthetic look on the roof without the pains of solar panels. That's it. I won't even qualify that any further. And then, of course, the bigger picture of reducing greenhouse emissions. And lastly, once net metering is in place in our country, we're looking at selling back power to the grid. That means passive income for anyone who is in the system. That means a lot of savings. And that just means an improved livelihood for a lot of us. So other products that we have are solar cups. So this is something innovative that we're still trying out, but we've used it actually. We used it in that house. So solar cups are rich cups that have solar water heating capabilities. We all know, well, the ones who are a little bit more knowledgeable on PV is not very efficient when it comes to heating. So we've gone with solar cups which have solar water heating capabilities. So you use the PV for your power needs within the home, and the solar cups are a 6-meter length can give you up to 150 liters of hot water throughout the day. And lastly, what I talked about, compressed air energy storage. It's a big cube, that's what we call it. It's actually stored in a container just like that. And it has cylinders that at the moment we have a 40 kilowatt hour system. That's the smallest we have. Because of economies of scale, we will work towards bringing it down for use for individual homes. But the beauty about this, I like to talk about this, is that the byproduct of it is water, clean water, because it's compressed air. So once it's discharging, the turbines actually give out clean water, which can be used, if purified, even for human use. Amazing. We will see it working. We have our partner in South Africa, but we'll have our first one in Kenya by the end of the year this year. Solar water heating is something else that we came into because we're in the solar industry. Now, this came in because, well, the writing is too little. But not too long ago, a public notice was put up by our Energy Regulatory Commission that every house that uses more than 100 liters a day must have solar water heating. So it's regulation, it's law. So that works perfectly for us. So we also went into solar water heating systems. I mean, this has been keeping us going because everybody's in a rush. The deadline was last month. No, it's actually this month. It was on the 25th of this month. Or was it last month? Yes. So there's a rush for let's get this just so that we're not arrested, which works very well for us at the moment. But I mean, ideally, that's not how we should be working. We, as the ones who know better, should go into renewable energy before it's mandatory, just because we know we should, to save the world. So I talked about power consumption trends and how expensive power has become. In our country, I'll just be specific about our country. A year back, anyone who used about 208 units of power would pay about 3,865. I was quickly doing the math. It's about 28 pounds a month, just short of 30 pounds. Typically a household would pay about that much. But right now, this cost a year later, it's about 3 times this. Is there any reason why? Because everything has just gone up. It's fuel, it's politics, it's something. There's always something. But if you had solar, that's what we always say. If you have a renewable energy resource, your bills would pretty much be about the same or even lower. So just to end my presentation, I told you I'll be very short and sweet. I just thought to show our management team. I don't work alone. We're a team of 10, and out of 10, at least 40% are women. I must say that and stress on that because it's important for me. So there's 2 other ladies who are not here, but part of the management team. Tony, in full discretion, is my elder brother. So Tony and Charity, our brother and sister, and then we have Daisy and Douglas, and we have a team of another 6. So it is the ladies from Myanmar who talked about low private firms, but about low impact and family businesses that, well, we bootstrap and we don't have much impact too far. But yes, we do have impact around us. We're not foreign, we are local. So local impact, but yeah, we do go around. And our product has been seen. I like to show this slide because our product has been interacted with a few interesting people. So that is Tony, and the other gentleman happens to be the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta. And when Mark Zuckerberg visited Kenya last year, when he sneaked into Kenya rather, he did interact with our roofing tile at one of the offices he went, and very impressed by it actually. And we're still waiting to hear from him though. The first picture, my brother was trying to explain to His Excellency the President how we would be very useful in his Big Four agenda of housing and bringing electricity costs down. This actually has been very interesting because we've been invited in a few other forums to discuss how we can be involved. So we may be small, but we are big. We have a big heart, we have a big vision, and we believe we'll go far. And I enjoy the LCEDN forums. This is my third, actually. Wonderful interaction with this initiative because of, I mean, I was just telling somebody that the research that is done is not just for shelving. It's research for use, for practitioners. So I'm glad to be part of this network. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charity. Just to let you know a bit about Charity, it won't surprise you to know that on the way from the airport yesterday, she persuaded the taxi driver to let him use her phone to phone me up and say, is there anyone else at the hotel here? I want to start networking immediately. And she said, tell them there's an attractive young lady waiting for them. And I said, well, that's a good thing because that can kind of balance out the high quotient of ugly elderly men we've got here. So anyway, obviously we're going to overrun a bit. I am literally blown away by the quotient of extraordinary innovation from the Global South we've seen and the networking and the opportunities that I see here. I would ask you, obviously, hopefully you've got your questions for the speaker, just to have a think about this idea of the challenges and opportunities, which is the sentence that finishes the little précis at the top of the thing, and to ask, hopefully, our speakers about that. I wanted to ask Anshuman, for instance, about, he mentioned 4 or 5 failures out of this vast plethora of success he's had, and what that was all about. I'm not going to abuse my position, so we'll keep that for later. So could we have anyone who would like to ask a question to one or all of our speakers, please? Ben, down there in the front.
Where is Anshuman?
At the top there.
Anshuman. Okay, I was very interested in the map you had showing the green areas of India where the Adivasi populations are. I mean, it's not doing sustainable energy at all. This is a very important number of the all who live in India. These are also areas where currently there are something like 60 insurgencies going on. So I'm just wondering, how do you manage to operate with a lot of political conflict? There are far-right-wing Hindu groups, there are Maoist insurgents, there's all sorts of things going on. So could you explain how you address the collaboration with communities at a collective level and ensure that your projects, you must do a lot of preparatory work to make sure your projects have consensus from the grassroots community?
Great. Yeah. Anshuman's up there. Is that there?
Yeah, I mean,
Do you want several questions?
No, we'll do them one at a time to start with, and then maybe if we run out of time.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. So the first question you had was the challenges part. So one of the challenges Tarek mentioned is Vietnam, for example, where the grid is pretty good. So in India, we're seeing that the grid is getting better and the grid is getting extended to rural areas, and some of our villages have also seen that. So we focus on unelectrified villages for our microgrids, but of them, like 6 or 7 have already seen the grid come. Or in 1 or 2, the government has actually set up its own mini grid because they don't want to extend the grid. So this is a place where we're getting crowded out. And I think when you look at who is the end consumer and are we just serving his needs, then obviously the grid is a good answer for him or her. So we really don't want to say that, oh, solar is better for you and therefore you should not go with the grid. This is something where we have to be very, very pragmatic and want to make sure that we end up doing the right thing. The second question is, yes, there are areas of left-wing extremism in India which are dangerous areas, and one of the things is that Dipti has far more experience in those areas because she's been working with Biogas and other places in Odisha. But of late, like 2 months ago, 44 districts were struck off the red list, which means that they become slightly better off. And we are seeing that it is being very, very focused on a few districts in 3 or 4 states. So obviously all of those green districts are those districts. That's absolutely right. And the reason for that is lack of development. And because of lack of development, all of these things happen. So we are very, I have had instances where, in the morning, we, left for a village to do a survey and to design a system and stuff like this. And we got news that there are 40 people sitting there with weapons and stuff like that in that village. And we had to come back and then go back a few months later. So, these are things. So, this one village we concluded work, last week. I just showed, photos of that village, which should have been done in February. But we realized that there were some conflict areas in that village. Some people were trying to create trouble. And so, it's always the villagers who kind of lead us, and we want to be behind them. So, we don't really want to say that we will do things beyond our thoughts. So, we very focused on communities, and so we now work with 50,000 people, and these 200 projects serve roughly 50,000 people. So one of the things our team understands is communities. So we make our mistakes, but we're very sure that only when communities are ready and they say, oh, yes, here it is, this is the land, these are the papers, and we are going to lead it, and these are the men and women who are going to help you, and so one of the things is some of the villages that we worked in 5 or 6 years ago or 4 years ago, a lot of the tribal population from those are now our full-time, staff or like co-owners of the company that we work in. So they kind of lead us in those areas. So it's after a time it becomes slightly easier, I would say, but yeah, we have to be careful of that. Thanks.
Anyone else? Any other questions left? Can you give your name and affiliation?
Okay, sure. My name is Eva, and again to Anshuman, I just wanted to ask, what's the rate of return on investment in your project?
That's a difficult question. So, India is a very difficult country with respect to electricity, the way we live. So, all of these are essentially capital grant-based projects, where there is no real reason for the money to be looked at as a return. But some of them have shown some surplus and it can come back. So, what happens is that we lose roughly 100,000 crores, which is a huge amount of money. I mean, if I was to convert 1 billion kind of, 100 billion something, every year in the electricity sector and primarily in the villages. So, cities pay up pretty well. So, all of a sudden, 650,000 villages in the country, you lose money. And when you say that these are the 30,000-40,000 remotest villages, and we want to take very expensive technology there and want to make a return, it doesn't work. So Smart Power India, which is the Rockefeller Foundation program, for the last 7, 8, 9 years has been pouring in money like billions, trying to say that there is a reason for some amount of market-based intervention, as they call it, and they have failed. So we have not seen any model in these villages where you look at saying that, okay, this is a spreadsheet and this is how we will make money with microgrids, I'm saying. With drinking water and with irrigation-based pumping that we do nowadays, there is the capital which comes back. It could come back just about the capital or maybe some return to 3-4%, doesn't matter. But with microgrids, we've not been able to look at capital. Have I answered the questions? Yes.
Lady here.
My name is Surabhi with the LCEDN. I think the question I wanted to ask in particular to the micro hydro entrepreneurs was, and I know we're discussing this again on the last day around finance, but it would be good given this audience to also understand exactly or typically what is the kind of financing that most of these entrepreneurs are able to access, and at the end of the day, what kind of structure do most of them have? So proprietorships, do they end up getting grant finance, and to what extent are they dependent on other local capital? All the three.
Yeah, financing is also important. As you mentioned, village electrification is more expensive than electrifying a town, and everybody expects that this can be financed like that. It's also some kind of unfair. So that means in Indonesia, often the projects are government projects, and then the plant is handed over to the communities, and the communities, we think, have to make a setup that they can pay the operation and repairs. So they need to set up a tariff system which gives enough money for the operators to operate it, like a small management team, bank account so that they can accumulate the money. But they cannot pay back the entire investment. Also, they often contribute with labor. Hydropower is a lot of work. Bringing stone, sand, whatsoever is also a contribution which is in kind. So, and there are also projects like tea plantation which we have, which are very profitable. Because of the energy price going up, since I'm there 12 times, so from 500 rupiah to 8,000 rupiah, that makes a difference for entrepreneurs like a tea plantation, so they are more and more also investing just like this. Also, some power plants can deliver to the grid, and that's the best what can happen, because you can sell all the energy, excess energy you can sell. So if the grid is coming to a hydropower plant, there should be a political solution to connect it. It's technically not a problem, but they make a problem out of it. And I think this is important for the safety of investment to have this regulation set up. So and we have some examples of power plants where the grid came, they connected like the 30 kilowatt I've shown there, and after 10 years they collected enough money to build a second power plant with some support. And that's some kind of sustainability. But often the grid is coming and it's too comfortable, so I switch on and they abandon it, and that shouldn't happen. But it's a political issue that this is solved.
Can I see, so Shukri is number one and this colleague over here is number two question, yeah?
Hi, I just had a question for you. I think it's everyone's presentation is great, by the way. But I really liked your approach in involving the community. But one thing that we discussed in the general energy session is to really try to specify who is the community. And I think with you, you're doing it very specifically, introducing, looking at what the needs are, whether it's a water pump, whether it's lighting, whether it's whatever it is. So I'm just wondering, do you also specify who is the community? Is it women? Is it men? Is it? And another follow-up question for the other participants is also like, the other presenters is that how are you engaging with the community? Although I don't want to use the word. And so the second question to you is also, are you looking into productive uses of this energy as well working in less developed areas in India?
Yeah, so we have been conscious from day one that women need to be involved. Typically in tribal areas in India, we have realized that women play a very large, in some cases even dominant kind of role in their families. And that has been therefore easy for us to involve them largely. In all the biogas projects that we've done, we realized that the cow manure or the dung in the slurry cycle is predominantly male dominated, whereas the entire energy or the gas part is female dominated. So from the first village itself, we had at least a 7-member committee in each village, local energy, and we call it a Gramoorja committee. And in each of these, we needed at least 3 women. So we've had some villages where there have been all 7 women, but at least 3 women. And from day one, what we did, and that was intuitive, and we just kind of wanted that to be a way to extend our goodwill into the society, was that none of these inaugurations we call big guys and ministers and stuff like that. So we always get the first light or the first bulb to switch on by the youngest girl child. And that becomes a way to tell the village that it's for your future. So it's not for anyone else who's like coming here to see and trying to create a Facebook post for me, right? It's about you. So that's something which intuitively we did, and it's like caught on. So now all of a sudden every day whenever a village is completed, we see some young girls who are trying to switch on something and everyone clapping around and tagging her. So this is something which we've done. It's very, very gender focused. Energy in India has been looked at as a gender, as a female entity anyways. So we're getting more and more conscious. So for example, the next few biogas grids that we've kind of already prepared, the entire committee or the committee in the village are all women. So it's no male participation in all of this.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, so all of our grids we wanted at least pumps. We wanted.
just to clarify, like especially in the water pump, so if the time saving of collecting water, we also involve community. Like, what do women do then with that time saved? Is it usage?
You don't get involved.
Same time, but their socialization has come down.
So we don't get to that level. I think we do what we do best. Villages shows our best. Like, it's good that they can save. It's more than just time. It's distress. You know, very clearly, it's distress. The next generation, girls who are growing up in these villages are not looking at this as the future. So you saw that picture of all the girls that are out of the school. These, when they grow up, they will look for better lives. And one of the ways would be to migrate to cities where they at least can just open up the tap and get water, or they just switch on the gas kind of a pipeline. Or you could get some infrastructure there. And some of these top-down approaches will not work in these remote areas, because by the time it goes there, there's a lot of filtration and losses and stuff, and kind of. So one of the things that we've now realize with all of these people coming and doing internships and studies and stuff like that, because we are not intelligent people, we just know how to work in these villages. They tell us, oh, you know what, there's a polycentric kind of developmental model which is evolving, this is happening, that is happening, new governance things are happening, we agree some things are happening. And now there is enough data for more people to do research and tell us what's happening. But like, if you were to ask me to get into a conversation on that, I would say let me just find the next village, do a next form with a little bit of money. And
this colleague here.
My question is still for Anshuman. Research fellows, this may be a bit of a tangent, but when you're doing your meet with the productive use of energy, have you employed it for any water purification consideration of drinking water? And if so, have you encountered any challenges around the willingness to pay for this water?
Yeah, so water people pay. So they would also be metered, right? So the metered connection would mean at the end of the month if it's like 20 pounds, and there are 50 families, they'll all pay 48 cents or something like that. So they will do that whole thing. So it's nothing that we get involved in. We just tell them these are the possibilities, and they do it themselves. Water purification or anything beyond just water and rice mills requirements, we enable them. So this is like 230 volts, 50 hertz power, right? What we would get in any city in India. So if that is available, it is up to the community to decide, and that's the reason we do AC and not DC. If you were to ask me, I'm all for DC, because this is solar produces DC, and almost all appliances today are DC in terms of at least our mobile phones, computers, televisions. But we do AC only because we want the freedom, in the hands of the villagers to decide what they want to use, because we don't get good appliances, which are DC appliances, so easily in India. At these remote locations, at least. So that's one of the drivers. But your question on water purification, there have been some cases where they're installed, but we don't get to that level. We just know that our focus is to be able to maintain the system for a 20-year cycle. One generation should be able to see the benefits of that water pumping or the electricity in their homes and the village. But beyond that, we leave it for other organizations who are already present there, already working with rural empowerment or agriculture, health, education, watershed development and stuff like that. So, if we have to scale up, if we have to do many more villages, we have to also decide what we don't want to do. That's a difficult part, but we still, we remain focused.
I see a hand raised there.
Hi, it's Sam Anderson from University of Bristol. I sort of have a question for Dipti and Charity. So microhydro has been obviously very, very useful in terms of local manufacturing. I think Gerhard talked about that, and you were talking about having local manufacturing. And wind turbines, again, have the possibility of local manufacturing, but solar PV doesn't really have that. And what do you think? Is there an enabler to be able to do that? Is there an enabler to? I didn't know quite where Charity got her solar panels from to put in her roof piles. I'm looking for it. Okay. But is there an enabler to be able to do that? Do you think? And what do you think? Is there anything that's causing that barrier to solar PV to be able to locally manufacture it, or anything different that's able to locally manufacture?
Well, I
guess PV, my answer to that would be PV is, first, we don't manufacture them in Kenya, that's there. We get our food products coming in, we import it from China, we have a manufacturer. We did start in Kenya. However, because of quality control and the numbers, we weren't able to maintain that. So we have to get a bigger manufacturer. That said, we don't have a very enabling environment in Kenya in terms of part of solar imports. I'll qualify that. We have a zero-rated policy for solar products. However, when we started importing our products, our tile has 3 cuts. So the solar cells, which we're not trying to reinvent or build, will get the best of the day, whether it's manufactured. Those come in and those are those are zero rated. But then the plastic and ceramic substrate and the electrical component at the back is not. So it's still taxed, which raises our cost. But if you bring in the tile as a tile, it's zero rated. So it's an oxymoron, as I say. And I remember having this conversation with Eric at the lunch table and complaining about it. But anyway. So unfortunately for us, it's at a much higher level. I don't think I'm in a position to answer that. We're lobbying, and that's all we can do. So for hydro, maybe it depends on us.
I know you were just making the observation.
Yeah.
Hydro, yes. So solar cells are a complex technology. You need diamond cutters, etc. And China dominates the market, and so there are like systems of scale at play. But same with battery technology as well. So so it also leads to financing. Usually biomass applications and hydro cost less per kilowatt, have less levelized cost of electricity because of the local manufacturing parts. But then solar perhaps is more available in a certain area, so there are pros and cons. But otherwise, what other, I mean, the mounting for solar panels can be localized. Yeah, I've heard of a company in India getting scrap solar cells and then having women electricians join them together, but the raw material, the raw cells have to come from. But and with hydro, the generator typically has to come from somewhere else. but everything else is a little, yeah, being synchronized.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to bring it to a close there because my mate's head is gesticulating. That was just a fantastic session. Thank you very much, both to the UK innovators who went before this in the other section, but most specifically our guests from Southeast Asia and all over the world. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you everyone for sticking with us through what's been a very long but really interesting day. I think there is no formal provision for this evening, so everyone's free to go and do what they might want to do. I'm sure there'll be lots of conversations continuing over dinner at the Link Hotel or other places in the urban metropolis that Loughborough is. Just actually one thing. Charity was saying that complaining about the weather twice. I know she should quite get to number 3. But I did notice actually it's a bit of kettles boiling pots black, I think, because given what's been happening in Kenya recently, Charity. So thank you very much, everybody. We'll be starting again at 9 o'clock in the morning. A lot more interaction in some of the sessions tomorrow, but I think it's been pretty interactive today. So I think we all owe ourselves a round of applause.
So thank you very much, everybody. We will end this webinar now, and we look forward to joining us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock UK time.